Why hello there, this is your good Thomas Friend 74. Now I did briefly took a look at these engines when I did these unboxing, which of course you're seeing is the Plarail C12 and D51. I barely took a look at these two when I did the unboxing. The C12 was recent, it was this year, and the D51 was last year. But I think it's now time for me to take a proper look at these and show the history and see them both test run perfectly. So let's begin. So let's turn them around. First, we're going to start off with the D51, right here. Well, as you can see that the D51 is the starting base of Plarail. Of course, what you're seeing is a tender engine, of course, D51 is. And it has the usualities, it's got red wheels, yellow side rod, and no painted details. Of course, this is how they started off with, and this is one of those D51s. And it also has the tender. And there's a reason about this tender I want to talk about later in the video. And they both have an old style coupling right here. And this type of coupling is the ones that do not have the split beyond the axis hole. And the D51 has a long skinny coupling. Now there are versions of trains that Plarail made that actually has the long skinny coupling. And well, I got one of those, which is the D51. The D51 actually has amazing details if you haven't noticed. Very interesting. Now here is the Plarail C12, which is a tank engine. The C12 is very more surprising to have way more detailing put onto the C12 than the D51. If you don't believe me, if we take a good look at this through the reflection here, a lot of detail. There's even some ladders right there on the boiler. And there's even, well, a ladder right there with a very nice detailed lamp. It's all around just a fantastic model of a C12. Very interesting. And this one's also the same way as the D51, where it has red wheels and a yellow side rod with no painted details. But one thing I noticed about the D51 and C12 is that the stickers on the D51 are actually reflective. The stickers on the C12 aren't. So the D51 actually has one unique benefit from the C12. And also, it has an operating headlight on the D51, C12 doesn't. So, let's take a look at these one at a time. Next. We'll start off with the Plarail D51. Now, from the Plarail D51, this was the first steam locomotive Plarail made. This one started first. It started way back in 1971. Yep, that's the year when this was released. It was released in a 3-pack with 2 flatbeds. One you could actually put a car in it. An actual vehicle. And for those years, when it was going on, it was starting to release more and more versions of the D51 as the years go by. But of course, this is from the front switch versions, where they have the switch here at the front. Turn that on, and the motor goes. It has some type of a clicking mechanism inside the motor, which makes a clicking sound whenever time it goes around. Unfortunately, I do not have that version. This is the only version of the D51 I have. Now, all other versions of the D51 are always exactly the same to this, but there are also variants that Plarail made of other steam locomotives. However, those are pretty much the D51 as always. They're always, the D51 is always this shell, because this and another train, the C12, we're going to be looking at a bit later, are the only two regular original steam locomotives Plarail made, and that's the only ones they made, mainly for the fact that they didn't have enough budget. Remember, Plarail was still in its infancy, and sometimes Plarail were using some moldings from other models that use the same molds as this is very common, even way back here. Here are two examples. Here are two. In 1973 or 4, Plarail made the C58, which is exactly this. It's exactly the D51, but has the two middle wheels and a tender. Now, I'll explain about this tender a bit later, because there's something with the tender about the D51 that I'm not too sure what Plarail was thinking. And there's, of course, a C62, which, again, is also the D51, as per usual. However, that version has some little bit of differences. Of course, it will have a tender, but the tender is the battery compartment. So there's wires going, there's a permanent connector connects to the tender, which stores two AA batteries inside. The D51 will have a sticker right here with the emblem of the Galaxy Express, but there will be an access hole here and a piece of plastic that moves up, and I think there's also a fan inside, mechanically, blows air out of the little hole here, and it makes a whistle sound. Yeah, an immense whistle sound. It's actually a very interesting concept. Very nice. And for the rest of the D51s, well, there are some minor differences. The stickers right here may be different. It may have a blue, a blue background with different type of text font that Plarail used for these models. And it continued on. But with those models of the D51, they never have a tender. Yeah, the D51 never had a tender. So it was just, well, like this. That's how the D51 was way back then. The C58 version of that made the tender. But what makes it so bizarre is that Plarail did manage to bring back the tender in 1982 from one pack. Yeah, only one pack with these and a mail van. Well, not this exact one. This is actually a very special one that the version of the D51 comes with. It's actually a very special one. I won't spoil it, so I'll save that to be another video. But it's actually a very interesting concept about that mail van, about what happened. However, that's it. That's how the D51 ended up getting a tender, was only on that pack. All other packs, including sets Plarail made, the D51 didn't have a tender. And of course, those were still front switch models of the D51. Well, eventually, in the 90s, is where they wanted to do one major change to this, is by giving the D51 an operating headlights, which of course this one has, which I'm quite surprised. So they have an operating headlight, but still the front switch models. And of course there were two versions of that. One is of course the original front switch model, but of course later on, and maybe in 1993, it was this version that finally came out with the updated motorized unit that can do a freewheel technology. I'm not too sure if the front switch ones have this feature. It looks like they don't. And they also kind of updated the side rods a bit. They moved into this, which is kind of also a design flaw as well, because if you know by seeing these on eBay, the problem is that people can just squeeze the side rods and they bend very easily. And you've seen that a lot with these models, with these type of side rods. It's often that way. But yeah, but even with this version of the D51 came out, it still never had a tender. Well, eventually, in the mid-90s, they did make a pack of the D51, but somehow still the front switch one, but it came with a tender, but it's actually a different size tender. It's actually going to be a little bit longer, and it has the slots, a hole, where you can put in one of the old-style Plarail minifigures inside. They made two trains, which is the 300 class Nozomi and the 209 class commuter train. I also made the D51 as well. But that was it. The rest never had a tender until probably the early 2000s when they repainted the D51 with some painted details, and they decided to just give it the rest a tender. So, if you are going for this version of the D51, at least the one I'm showing you here, don't expect you'll ever get the tender, because honestly, you'll never will. Now, onto the Plarail C12. This is the tank engine version, which was probably released, I think, in 1973, is where this one was released. So it came after the D51. And again, it's the front switch versions of the C12 that Plarail started off with. And the pack is actually exactly the same to the D51. Even its two flatbeds, with one of them you can put in the vehicle on it. And that's it. And there were a few other packs and sets that this C12 was released in. But what makes this surprising is that there aren't any special variants of the C12 in the front switch design. It's always on this updated version right here, released in 1994, I think. Well, what's according to the date on this C12. But one thing I actually kind of noticed on the C12, only on the front switch C12, is that it has something similar to like a front coupling. Or something like this type of coupling. Something like that. And it actually did have like a set the C12 was released in with a snowblower that it pushes on. I'm not too sure there were other things Plarail made for the front switch C12, but that seems to be it. But yeah, the rest are just versions of the updated motor C12, which is this. And you can see that this one even has the updated side rods, which again, it's the same problem. In fact, this one actually has the bented side rods. Mine came with that completely bented. It's on both. I think the D51 was actually very clean. I think there was one that was about to be bent, but the other one was never bent. So, Yeah, I think the D51 was actually in good condition from the side rods, but the C12, yeah, it was completely damaged. Okay, anyways, onto the versions of the C12 that Plarail made. I think starting in 2003, Plarail made the C11, which pretty much is a C12. The cover is the C12, but it has an altered chassis. The wheels are black, and also have two middle wheels. Well, they're actually embossed in the plastic, so they're actually fake. So C11 is a 6-wheel based locomotive, and the C12 is a 4-wheel based locomotive. And the C11 has smoke deflectors, the C12 does not, and as well some painted details like the lamp, this part here for the smoke box, gold whistles, and another painted lamp at the back. It's pretty much that way. Though there was a version of a C12 that Plarail decided to also paint the details on, and it was the K-05 pack, which had the C12 exactly like the C11 with the painted details, and they also give the black wheels, but it has like a traditional side rod you see on the Thomas products. And what else? Oh yeah, there's also a version of this, another ordinary C12, which didn't have the painted details, but it actually has the hazard stripes on the front and on the back. And then also, in 2009, they made a newer type of C12 called the C12-50, which is the AA version of the C12. And that one actually has the correct proportions. This one is kind of a little bit too big of the proportions, but of course, back then, Plarail had to resort to C-sized batteries. So, yeah, this is the C-sized version of a C12, while the newer ones are the AA variety and have the correct proportions. And even the C11 also went with the same approach as well. Which, the C12-50 was released in a playset, which was to coincide Plarail's 50th year, since 2009 was the 50th year of Plarail, and eventually it was then sold separately in its own pack called KF-01. And that's all it for the C12, so not much to say with the C12, it's just, everything else is just less extreme than the D51. Alright, now let's try to put a battery inside both of these engines. So, both of them actually have the same type of opening part. You squeeze in both sides. There you go. You got your battery compartment. And again, this is the updated version. So, battery goes inside here. Of course, I am using a C-sized battery. Close it up. Turn on the motor. And there you go. The engine's running. And this also has an operating headlight, as you can see right there. The C12 is no different, except the opening part's on the other side here. This one, it did got me trouble, because I keep slipping, but now, here you go. And this one's no different. Put the battery in. There you go. Now, you gotta be very careful with this, because, see, this little peg here has to slot into this little hole. Because the connection is actually at the front, and there's a good reason why there's a connection here. From here, with this slot here. You kind of see this on the Thomas products. Because if it's has to open from here, it cannot work the same from this, because if I were to connect it like this, the entire thing is just going to be looking ugly like that. And it just really, again, it just looks very ugly if it's clipped in this way, but left this behind. So if there's an opening anywhere from here, there's going to have to be a clip from here, the hole, slot in, then it's that way. So it looks clean. And that's what's happening here. However, you can also forgot to mention that these both have different type of couplings. They're both different. The D51 has a long, skinny coupling, whilst the C12 has an original size coupling. However, the split line does not continue beyond the access hole. It's only on this side. Because the newer ones, the split line does continue beyond the access hole. These don't. The long skinny coupling. There's also a version of the long skinny coupling, which I'm trying to get, that does have the split beyond the access hole. Of course, this is the only one I have. The one that doesn't. And also, the tender for the D51 also doesn't have the split beyond the access hole. Oh, and one more thing about the D51 and C12. Not only that these were also released in Japan, but they were also released by Tomica World. But both of them were only sold in the UK. The D51 was released in 2 sets, while the C12 was only released in 1. I don't know the set numbers, but the D51 had 2 sets, and, well, it has the contents. The D51, a fuel tanker, and a log car, and unfortunately, those also didn't have a tender. So even the ones from Tomica World also didn't have a tender. There are 2 versions of those sets. I mean, both sets you saw there are the same D51. They also have the headlights, basically based on the one with the fuel tanker and a car transporting truck. It's basically that with an operating headlight. It's based on those. And the C12 was only released in 1 pack, and it was a track bucket set that actually has the lid in the form of double tracks you can ride on. It has the C12, a cattle van, and a brake van, which is something very surprising. And the cattle van actually has actual animals inside, modeled up animals. That is one very nice concept that Plarail did for international releases, sent to Tomica World. So that's actually very interesting, but again, those sets were only sold in the UK. Alright, now I'll get these two a little bit of a test run. So, here we go. C12 and D51. And that's it. So these were the first 2 Plarail steam locomotives in existence. These were the first 2 Plarail made in the front switch era. And it all began with these 2. It's all history from Plarail. And I will admit, these 2 are amazing models that Plarail made. Well, thank you all for watching this video.